Alright students, today we're going to talk a little bit about the skill of sighting. Some also call it visual perspective as opposed to linear perspective. If you've had a chance to read this chapter, Relationships in a New Mode, Putting Sighting in Perspective, then you've already got a little bit of some groundwork on how this works, but we're going to try to explain it, make it a little more practical, a little hands-on. Sighting is an excellent skill for drawing. It's probably one of the best skills you could ever learn in drawing anything, but it's particularly helpful when you're doing any kind of architectural type of drawing. For instance, a kitchen corner or a hallway drawing, it comes in really handy. And so we're going to talk a little bit about this skill. Now notice it talks about it as relationships. Well, when we talked to you at the very beginning of the school year, we said that there were 5 basic skills you needed to be able to draw anything. And they're all perceptual skills. The first skill was perception of edges. The second one was perception of shapes, positive spaces, negative spaces. The third one is perception of relationships, not as in boyfriend, girlfriend kind of relationships, but how big is one object compared to another object, or what kind of angle does this line make versus a vertical, or what kind of angle does this line make versus a horizontal. So when we're talking about relationships, we're talking about sizes and angles, and the skill that we're going to teach you today is going to really help you with that. So first let me zoom in just a little bit here with my camera, and I'm going to show you some pictures, and they come directly from this chapter on sighting. Now the first skill that we're going to talk to you about is angles. Okay, so for instance, right here we've got someone who is wanting to draw a chair, and they notice that the chair has a particular angle. Now they could probably just look at it, make it up, and draw it, but what they're going to do instead, they're just going to take a few extra seconds and just check the relationship of this angle compared to a vertical. Why a vertical line? Well, because this angle is much closer to a vertical than it is to a horizontal. If you took your pencil and put it in a horizontal position, you'd have to go a really long way around, or you could go up here, I guess, and it would be a little shorter, but it's a little more awkward. So it makes more sense that because it's closer to a vertical, you would compare it to the vertical side of your pencil. So what they do is they take their pencil, they hold it up as if the foot of this chair is touching the pencil, and then they just simply rotate their pencil and then go straight. And they do this about 4 or 5 times, and the reason why they're doing this 4 or 5 times is so that when they come over to their blank piece of paper, they can take their pencil, kind of image what the angle is going to look like, and then draw it. And what this little few seconds of doing this can keep you from making a silly mistake. Now some of you might not be sold yet. You might think, well, I don't know if I'm convinced that this is really useful. Well, let's use another example. In this drawing, you're going to see that they're wanting to draw the top of the chair, and so they don't want to take for granted what the line looks like. So they take their pencil and they put it out and they put it on top of the chair, and they choose a horizontal orientation for their pencil because it's closer to a horizontal line. Now you're seeing the same thing I am. You're like, well, duh, look at that. That's a flat line. I didn't need to put my pencil on top of that to see that that's flat. Well, maybe not. You know, our left brain knows that the tops of chairs, the seats of chairs are parallel to the ground. We know this. We know this is true. We know this is a fact. But you guys have learned in here so far that what you see and what you know to be true do not always line up. Sometimes what you know to be true doesn't match up with what your eyes perceive. So for this person, when they did it, they put their pencil there like, well, it's flat. Okay, but let's say that there's someone else in the same room, in the same class as this person, drawing the same chair, but let's say they're in a different place. Let's say they're 10 or 15 feet to the right of this person. Well, when they do the same thing and they put their pencil, they hold their pencil all the way out, and they hold it flat and horizontal, and they look at the top of the chair, they discover that there's actually an angle created from their point of view. Their neighbor that was 10 or 15 feet away had a perfect view. It was perfectly horizontal. What they knew and what they saw matched up. But here what the person knows, that the top of this chair is parallel to the ground, just like the seat is parallel to the ground. But from their point of view, it doesn't look that way. And so just taking a few seconds and just doing this a few times real quick can help them later on when they get ready to draw that angle. They can image it a few times, kind of create a little bit of a muscle memory. They just do this a few times, and then they come over to their paper and they try to angle it the same direction. Now, they're not necessarily going to get a 100% accurate reading, okay, compared to a horizontal line. That's the angle they found. It's not going to be 100% exact. You're not using a protractor, you're not using some kind of compass. But what it does, it keeps you from drawing a straight line when from your point of view, maybe it doesn't look this way. It looks this way instead. Now let's use another example. Here's a person trying to draw a table. And what they're trying to do is they're trying to figure out the angle of the left side of the table and the right side of the table. Now, I've given assignments where I've had students draw kitchen corners, and they felt that they had to draw their table in there, which I didn't want them to do. But when they drew their table, what they did, they knew that tables were what shape? Well, not every table, but a lot of tables are rectangular. We know that this table is a rectangular table. We can tell just by looking at it. But here's the thing. Rectangles have 90-degree angles. The only way that you could see a table as a rectangle is if you're floating directly above it, suspended in the air or from the ceiling by wires, or the table's floating high above you and you see it as a rectangle. When you look at it sitting down or even standing up across the room, there are no right angles here, are there? It's more of a diamond-like shape. And so by taking your pencil and just pretending like maybe that corner's a pivot point and just rotating it and going flat, rotating it and going flat, helps you see that there's actually an angle on that side. And there's a different angle here. Notice that the angles aren't the same. It just depends on where you are in the room, whether the angles are different or not. Now, another example would be like this table here. Notice this table leg. Most people, if they were going to draw this table leg, they would have thought, oh, I'm just going to draw a rectangle. Well, this particular table leg is a block. It's not rounded like some tables are. And what they discovered was when they took their pencil and laid it here at the bottom, they discovered there was actually an angle on the left side and there was an angle on the right side. And most likely pretty parallel to the tops of this table because it's such a short distance. But sometimes it's rounded off, but here it wasn't. Okay? Now let me show you one more example where this is useful. If you're drawing a kitchen corner, when you're trying to draw the corner of your kitchen, let's say you're facing the corner head on like this. Well, if you take your pencil and you hold it like these people are, like this person is, and hold it in both hands, and just put your pencil right up in the corner, and I might have you do this in the room where you are right now. Whatever room you're in right now, I might have you look at the corner that's furthest away from you. It's easy to do this with the corner that's furthest away from you. Take your pencil, if you need to pause the video, take your pencil and pause it, and do this to the corner in your room. And then tilt it on the left side and go flat. Tilt it on the left side and go flat. Do that 3 or 4 times. And then maybe on a scrap piece of paper, take your pencil, take it flat and tilt it just a little bit, the same measurement you think it is. Might want to have that vertical drawn first. That might make it easier. And then take your pencil, go back to the view, tilt it up, and notice it's a much more extreme angle, isn't it? If you compare that to horizontal, it's a much more extreme angle. And the reason why is because the person is closer to the right wall than they are to the left wall. So if you do this to the right side a few times, just a few seconds, come back to your drawing, try to create the same angle, and compared to a horizontal line, you don't need to draw this on your drawing, but compared to a horizontal line, this angle is much steeper than this one. And just taking a few seconds and just comparing this angle to a horizontal line and this angle to a horizontal line allows you to capture that reality. Now, one thing that will help when people try to do these kind of angles, I'm going to show you something that they do that is wrong. When they sight, sometimes they want to take the pencil and they want to tilt it away from themselves and try to line it up. Like they get this end of the pencil close to them and they try to line this pencil up exactly with that line. You can't do that because here's the thing. You're drawing this on a flat two-dimensional piece of paper. So when you're actually sighting a real angle, you need to pretend as if your pencil is flat. Like pretend like there's a glass window blocking you in this view, and you're putting your pencil on that glass window, and you can't push the pencil into the window or you'll break it. You have to either go up or down like a steering wheel. You can't go back and forth. And that's going to help you sight it accurately. That way, when you're comparing the angle to a flat horizontal line, when you come to your drawing paper, you're going to be able to do the exact same thing. All right, and it is easier to do this from a drawing to a drawing than it is in real life to a drawing. But you can still do it. The concept still applies. Now, that's the first half of the skill. And that also comes in handy with hallway drawings too. If you take your pencil and you take it to the corner, you can always say, okay, compared to a horizontal line, how much of an angle is this angle compared to a flat line? And you can draw it. You can do the same thing with the floor, and it works the same way. Compared to a horizontal line, what kind of angle will it make? And the angles might be the same if you're exactly in the middle, but if you're closer to the right side, this will be steeper, and the floor would be steeper. If you're further away from the left-hand side, this would be shallower, and this would be shallower. Okay? Now, let's talk about the second half of the skill. And the second half of the skill has to do with sizes. Okay, those were angles. And sizes are probably the most practical application of this. Okay? So let me show you. In this drawing right here, it looks like they're measuring the angle again. Well, they're not. What they're doing is they're taking their pencil, they're holding it, and they're trying to measure the width of the table. And I know that the copy's cut off a little bit here, but they're trying to measure the width of the table. Okay? So they're taking their pencil and putting it at the end of the table, and they're pinching the pencil right here. And they're putting their arm all the way out. The reason why they put their arm all the way out is so that way every single time if their arm's all the way out, it'll always be the same relationship every time. And then what they're doing is they're comparing that width to the length of the table, and they're going to discover that the table is about 1.5 times as long as it is wide. Now, to the eye, to how it appears. So simply by measuring the width, pinching their pencil, keeping their finger right on the pencil exactly where they need to, and saying 1, okay, yeah, it looks like it's going to be about 1.5, okay? So when they get ready to draw it on a separate piece of paper, all they have to do is say, okay, they get their angle first, and then whatever length this is, 1, about 1/2 right there, that's about how long it will be. And it just helps them get an estimate. Whenever you're measuring something like this, you don't have to literally draw it on your paper the same size as this distance on your pencil. It doesn't matter how long you draw it on your paper. What does matter, though, is that the relationship of this to this would be like 1.5. They did the same thing over here. When they measured the width of the table, they compared it to the table leg, and they discovered that the table leg was actually shorter than the width. So it allowed them to control their proportions. Now let me show you some ways that would be helpful. If you look at these views right here, look at this table. This table is viewed from 3 different points of view. Do you notice how thinner or thicker it looks? That changes depending on how high up you are, if you're standing up or sitting in a chair, or whether you're getting down on your knees or trying to get your eyes really close to the table line. It'll look thinner. By taking just a few moments and just measuring how thick that table is compared to maybe the table leg, you'll discover that, oh wow, how is that possible? I know that this table is like 2 or 3 feet wide, but when I sight it, it doesn't look that way. That's because what you see doesn't always match what you know to be true. And so that can be very, very helpful, especially if you're trying to draw countertops in your kitchen corner. Sometimes they're a lot thinner than your mind knows that they are. Okay, last thing I'll show you is for practical things on sizes, not just architecture. Let's say that you were drawing a person. And let's say there was 2 people in the room. Let's say you had a person here and a person that was closer to you that was here. And, you know, because this person's further away, they look smaller. Well, how could you get the proportion correct? Well, what you could do is you could take your pencil and hold it all the way out at arm's length, and take your pencil tip and put it at the top of that head, put your thumb at the chin, and then pinch it right there. Now, that doesn't mean you're going to draw the head that big on your paper, but what you're doing is you're going to compare how big their head looks, this person way back here looks, compared to this person that's here. And if you measure it, you're going to discover that, oh wow, this person's head looks to be twice as big as this person. So whenever you draw the head on your piece of paper, if you draw that small person's head this big, well then when you come down here and say, okay, here's the person that's closer to me, 1, 2, about right there, that's how big his head is. His head is twice as big as his. Okay? Or if this was the little head, and you were trying to draw a bigger head, well, measure the little head on your paper, however big you draw it. Say, okay, here's where it's going to start, and it's going to be 1, 2. And that's the proportion of the head there. Let me zoom out so you can see it a little bit better. So regardless of whether, this person's head looks to be half the size, just simply taking a few seconds and comparing the size of one part of your view to another part of your view can help you understand if things are bigger or smaller. I mean, in real life, if these two people were side by side, their heads would be the same, but it doesn't appear that way on here. I hope that this demonstration has been helpful in helping you to understand how to use sighting, how to compare angles to horizontals and verticals, and how to compare sizes of objects to each other and parts of objects to each other. Good luck and happy drawing.